and this is A-Star Reads. And I'm going to be doing a Sunday sum up today. I didn't have any sum ups the last 2 Sundays. This one might be a little longer because I've got more ground to cover. I'm excited to share what books I've been reading with you. And I should say that today I am checking one off my Not Safe for Workathon prompts, which is medical play, which is do something healthy for yourself, because I'm out here taking Cece for a walk and I'm eating blackberries because they're fresh right now and I'm not the best fruit eater. More of a vegetable person. So anytime I eat fruit, I consider myself doing something healthy. Blackberries weren't that good. They were not that good. But I ate some, so I'm still counting that as a win. So before I talk about the books that I read over the last 2-3 weeks, I'm going to give you the final 3 books that I read in May, and we'll get caught up through that. I did quite a few things in between, including helping my aunt at the fair. She does the judging and stuff like that of the goats, and she's in charge of one of the 4-H programs. And then let's see, what else did I do? I went to California twice, and it's been a busy time. So, field work, some interesting field work. So I'll share some of that footage with you, and let's get started. I'm going to talk about the last 3 books that I read in May. I'm starting to struggle with the fact that I read them back in May and my brain is tired and it doesn't remember as much as I'd like it to. But what I'll do is I'll give you a rating for them, let you know what I read, and then kind of give as much information as I can give as far as, that goes. So the 8th book that I read in May was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. And this one was a 4.5 stars. I loved this. It was fantastic. It wasn't fantastic in the sense that it was really heartwarming or anything. It actually hit very close to home because this follows a pandemic. And it was a very destructive, very scary pandemic. There's not very many people living after this pandemic has finished, because this is in the future, like 20 years after the pandemic occurred. And reading this actually brought up a lot of the insecurities, fears, and things that I think a lot of us probably felt during this pandemic. Things that you don't usually think of. It wouldn't have affected me the same way had we not gone through the pandemic we're going through now. So it was really interesting reading this during a pandemic that for us in our lifetime is unprecedented. So it really was unnerving at times, the feelings it brought up, the thoughts it brought up, and seeing the extreme, a pandemic that goes to the extreme level where almost everybody dies. I'm sure we all kind of thought like, well, what's going to happen next during this pandemic now? So I got those kind of feelings from this book. It didn't really scare me in any way. I just thought that Emily St. John Mandel did such a good job depicting the kind of feelings you would feel during a pandemic and making this seem so realistic. I just loved the way she built her characters. I don't know that I was as crazy about the ending. Maybe I just wanted a little more from it. I can't remember. But I actually ended up buddy reading this with Katya from Katya Read, Write, Create, and it was such a good buddy read. We had so much fun. Fun meaning great conversations discussing this book, and it was just great to spend time one-on-one with Katya because we did Zoom calls and we got to see each other. It was just so much fun. And then having such an interesting book to talk about, that was fantastic. This is a really good book for a buddy read. So if you're looking for something to buddy read, I highly recommend this book. I think that it brings up a lot of topics that are really interesting to talk about with other people. Oh, I did mention in one of my previous videos that I ended up reading King Lear to be able to read this, because you don't need to have read King Lear to read this, but this centers around an actor whose life ends at the very beginning of the book when he's playing King Lear. And so there's actually a lot of nods to the play of King Lear in this. I loved reading King Lear and then reading this. I felt like it added to my experience so much more. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was fun chatting about King Lear and then Station 11 with Katya. And then for books 9 and 10, I actually ended up reading 10 books in May. That's pretty good. But I read Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen, and then I also read Persuasion by Jane Austen. And Sense and Sensibility was a reread. I listened to that on audiobook. Persuasion I actually physically read from my beautiful bind-up copy of Jane Austen's complete works. I've talked about these two quite a bit in other videos, so I'm not going to go too much into depth in it here, but I will say that Sense and Sensibility I gave 4 stars. And it was an interesting rating because it changed quite a bit. So when I first originally read Sense and Sensibility, I gave it 2 stars. I was not liking the characters, and I thought the story was just too dreary, too, I don't want to say dull, because dull wasn't it. It was just, it brought me down. And part of that reason was because I was traveling when I read it. I remember reading it on an airplane. I think that I've learned my lesson that when I'm traveling or on vacation, I should be reading books that are a little more lighthearted, because Sense and Sensibility is not a lighthearted book. I hated the characters. It brought me down. I gave it 2 stars. Then on this more recent reread, I actually rated it 3 stars. So bear with me. I rated it 3 stars because I was like, I still hate the characters. I hate the characters, but I'm enjoying the process of listening to it on audiobook. I'm enjoying the process of rereading the story. And of course, I love Jane Austen. I really do enjoy Jane Austen. When I read Mansfield Park, I realized that Sense and Sensibility was a 4-star read. And the reason for this is because I do hate the characters. I don't even like the main characters that much. They're not likable. They're incredibly flawed. But I really love the story of Sense and Sensibility, and I loved the experience of reading it. I had a hard time putting it down this last time. I mean, I know I was listening to it, but I had a hard time turning it off in a sense. I got a lot of entertainment out of it. And after reading Mansfield Park, which I didn't like the characters, kind of same with Sense and Sensibility, but I didn't get quite as much entertainment out of it. I was like, okay, I need to reassess how I was reviewing Sense and Sensibility, which was interesting because, I mean, it shows how reviews and how we can change, the way we perceive books can change, and also how we rate things can change. What our basis for rating is can depend on other books. Like this, my rating for Sense and Sensibility really was dependent on my feelings about Mansfield Park, which I wouldn't have known if I had never read Mansfield Park. So I found that fascinating. And then the other book, of course, was Persuasion, which is a 5-star read for me. And it is my favorite Jane Austen novel at this point. I still haven't read Emma and Northanger Abbey, but I will be reading those soon. It is the shortest, but I loved the characters. I loved the story. I loved the romance. I don't know why, but this one spoke to me for some reason. It felt a little more complex and nuanced, even though it wasn't. Like the storyline in Pride and Prejudice is way more complex. There's way more characters, way more family members, a lot of side stories. But for some reason, Persuasion just hit me in the right way. Don't get me wrong, I still gave Pride and Prejudice 5 stars and I still love it. But Persuasion just kind of ekes it out a teeny bit. Maybe it's that pivotal moment. And if you all know, you know, because it was so good. So good. I gasped. I cried. That one moment was 10, 20 star for me. I loved it so much. Anyways, okay. So those are my last 3 books for May to make up my full 10 books that I read in May, which was a pretty good reading month considering that was my last month of school. And I didn't give synopses on these. This one is about a pandemic, looking at the relationships between people who are surviving a pandemic. And Sense, Sensibility, and Persuasion are set in the early 1800s. They're really character-driven stories about society and all the difficulties that people, especially in the higher class, are facing within the society and the relationships they have with each other. It's very character-driven. So if you're interested in that, I recommend picking up Sense, Sensibility, and Persuasion. It's Wednesday. After work, I am tired. The last 2 days of fieldwork have been rough. Yesterday was rough. It was physically rough, but then also it was a bit of a scary survey we did. It was just very steep. There were a lot of like, it was nerve-wracking. Today was mostly on big boulders and stuff like that. And so, which normally would be okay, but my legs really wobbly because I was just tired today. So it just was like these 2 days, I'm like, oh, I'm getting too old for this. But I wanted to talk to you about Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I finished it last night, the 17th, and that was my 4th book that I finished for August. I gave it 4 stars. I actually really enjoyed it up until the ending. And the ending was just so much more mellow than I would have wanted. And I get the point of the ending, but it was just not how I would have wanted to end out this book, because it's a really short book, you know, it's only like 244 pages. It like takes you a while to get into it, I think, because you're not sure how you feel about the characters. At least I wasn't quite sure how I felt about the characters. The sci-fi itself is a little different, not bad different, just different. And so it takes a little time to really wrap your brain around it. But once you do, it gets exciting. I liked the pacing of it. I felt like the action was really good. It wrapped up in the way you expect it to wrap up, but it didn't wrap up in a pacing or in a style that I enjoyed as much. I don't know, it was a little lackluster. The ending was a little lackluster. I still enjoyed it though. It was a quick read. And if you like sci-fi, especially older sci-fi, I think that Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is very unique and creative. And actually the movie Blade Runner is based off the book, and I've never seen the movie, but I want to pick it up now because it's kind of one of those movies that has a lot of really hardcore fans. So I'd like to check that out. I heard it's a bit different than the book, but that's okay. I don't mind that so much. So it's set in 2021. It's actually written in the 60s. So 1968, I think, is when it was published. It was interesting seeing what Philip Dick's idea of what the world could look like in 2021 was. So it's after World War Terminus, and there has been a whole bunch of awful radioactive dust that is remaining after this giant war. And it has killed off many of the animals. A lot of animals on the planet are extinct. Humans have also been dying off, but then the ones that haven't been dying off have been moving to these colonies that have been established on Mars and a couple other places. The majority of people moved to the colonies. And during the whole colonization process, there were companies that were creating these androids that would travel with people to the colonies and do work for them. So basically, each person that moved to a colony, some of the incentive was that you would get your own android, and the android would do all your work for you like a servant. So there are people that still live on Earth. Some of them weren't allowed to go to the colonies because they couldn't pass certain IQ tests. Some of them are just much older and not as healthy. And then some people actually chose to stay on Earth. And one of those people is Rick Deckard. Rick Deckard is a bounty hunter, and he hunts androids. Because some of these androids that go off to Mars on the colonies end up killing their owners and escaping. And some of them make their way to Earth, and on Earth they need to be killed because they are renegade androids, and renegade androids who kill their owners are considered dangerous. So this book focuses on a day in the life of Rick Deckard where he's hunting and killing androids, and we are following him to see what his life is like. And he's dealing with some things that he normally doesn't deal with. He's dealing with ethics and empathy. One of the things that really differentiates androids between humans is empathy. Androids are thought to not have any empathy whatsoever, and humans are believed to have empathy. That's one of the ways you can test between the two and be able to discover androids. And that's also why it's so dangerous to have renegade androids out there, because they don't feel empathy. So you know that if they've gone bad, they're not going to stop because they feel guilty or anything like that. So there's this really big focus on empathy in this book, not just for androids versus humans, but also in the religion, which is called Mercerism. And what happens is there's this man named William Mercer that everybody holds onto this empathy box, and they fuse with each other. So you're able to fuse with other people that are on Earth. I think outside Earth too, I think in the colonies as well. You're fused with this whole process of him making it to the top of that mountain despite all the setbacks. So it's this concept that as long as you keep working towards it, you will eventually make it to the top. And you need to overcome all the things that are coming at you. And you just keep working towards that ultimate goal. And this is an interesting religion because on one hand, it creates camaraderie. Like, Earth doesn't have very many people on it anymore, and there's a really huge sense of loneliness that people tend to feel on Earth because there's not enough people around them, they don't have a lot of friends, and with mercerism, they can fuse together, and so they feel like they're coming together as a group. They don't feel quite so alone. But then on the other hand, it's sort of a form of control. A lot of people who are into mercerism really get into it and are really obsessed with it, and they allow it to control their lives and help them make their decisions. So it is a form of control in a sense that you're able to control these humans and their behavior and all the things that they do by using this programmed religion called mercerism. So I thought that was interesting, but then it's also interesting to look at this concept of empathy when it comes to the androids. The androids that these bounty hunters don't feel any empathy towards, or aren't supposed to feel empathy towards, because they're supposed to kill them on the spot, no problems. And what constitutes living versus not living, and what humans value when it comes to life and the things around them. I don't know, it's very complex. The more and more I think about all the elements of this book, the more I can see how you could really start thinking about this and fall into a rabbit hole of concepts and ideas of the philosophy of this story, of what Philip Dick's trying to do. This would be a good buddy read book for sure. So maybe I'll talk to people who, I think my friend Paige from Pages with Pages read this, so maybe I'll be interested to see if she wants to talk about it. Anyways, I feel like I'm not the most insightful today. I haven't really been the most insightful all week, so even though I've enjoyed this book and I feel like I'm understanding what's going on in it, trying to convey to you some of the philosophical implications of these concepts that Philip Dick is trying to get across, I'm struggling. Okay, so it is the 19th. Last night, actually it was this morning, because it was like 2 a.m. I finished Incense and Sensibility by Sonali. This one was not actually on my TBR, but it's the third in this series of Jane Austen retellings. This came out very recently. It came out like a couple months ago, and I was really excited to get my hands on it, and so I did from the library, and that was great. But I couldn't do any renews on it because everybody else wants to read it as well. So I had to kind of rush through this one. I have a lot of feelings about it. I gave it 4 stars ultimately. Now, when I first started reading this, almost the first half, maybe not quite that much, but almost the first half, I just wasn't into it. I wasn't enjoying the characters, which is Yash and India. I wasn't as excited about them. I didn't see the chemistry quite as much in the beginning. It was a little different because this book focused much more heavily on these 2 characters, whereas I found that in her other 2 books, Sonali Dev's other 2 books, she focused more on the family overall. I mean, she definitely had the main characters. She focused on the main love interests, but there was a lot of little side stories that had to do with the family members coming into play. And granted, there is a little bit of a side story with China, India's sister. I kind of liked how messy the other 2 books were, and this one wasn't that at the beginning. There just wasn't as much going on. It was really focusing on Yash and India, and it was a little slow-paced. Took me a while to get into it. Now, about halfway through, though, is when I really started feeling feelings about these characters and their romance, and it really started to kind of come alive for me in a sense. And I was surprised how much I started feeling for these characters and how much I started enjoying their relationship and things were going on. There were problems at points because there's a lot of miscommunication in this, and there were some moments that I just wanted to chuck my book, to be honest. I was so frustrated. Miscommunication can be so frustrating, and I was just like screaming at these characters. I was screaming at Yash. I was like, just tell people, just tell people. It was driving me insane. So that was hard. as you can tell. But there is something to be said for an author who can get me to feel such strong feelings. There was something really honest and innocent about this couple. I loved the emotion that ultimately, I didn't love it in the beginning. In the beginning, I was like, ugh, you know, it just didn't feel very real. But then towards the end, I really loved the emotion, and it brought out a lot of raw feelings for me. Feelings that Robot Amy has buried down deep inside for a very long time now. I was like, whoa, I hadn't brought up these kinds of emotions for a while. So I was like, oh, okay. So that was interesting. And I definitely felt that I was able to, I don't want to say relate, because I certainly never had the same situation as these characters, but it brought up the feelings that I have felt in past relationships that made this feel very real to me. Granted, it's very dramatic, just like all the other books in this series, and a little unrealistic when it comes to relationships and stuff like that. However, it still did tug on the emotional feelers a bit. So I did enjoy it for that. I would have given the second half of this maybe 5 stars. So ultimately 4 stars feels like a really good rating for me. So if you've liked the other Sonali Dev Jane Austen retellings, I would recommend this, absolutely. I really did enjoy it. Just be aware that the first half wasn't as exciting for me. I also should point out that this is not a regular romance. It has a lot of dramatic situations. There is a lot of looks at trauma. There are a lot of looks at race and identity in her books, in Sonali Dev's books, which I really appreciate. The conversations surrounding some of the characters is nice, because it's basically Sonali Dev writing about things that are happening in real life for someone who is a person of color, and then putting it into her books to kind of get a release. Like, she wrote this particular book during COVID and during all the things that were happening with Black Lives Matter and some of the things that were happening politically within the US. And so she put a lot of her focus and frustrations that she was feeling in her book. It was like a good release for her, but then also a chance for her to talk more about something that's really important to her. I can't wait to see if she comes out with more from the Jane Austen books. Like, we've got, the first one was Pride and Prejudice, the second one was Persuasion, this one is Sense and Sensibility. I'm hoping she continues the series, and we got other family members that need to be paired up, so we'll see what happens. What did it catch? Like a little mouse or something?
Yeah.
Oh, there it goes.
Oh, you got it on film?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Delicious. All right, forgive my messy house in the background, but yesterday, on August 22nd, I finished my 6th book of the month, which was The Passion by Jeanette Winterston. I was really interested in reading this book because it was the Trash My TBR book choice that I kind of decided, because I was interested in it, I would pick it. Nobody else really voted on it much, but I was like, you know, based on the synopsis, it sounded like an interesting read to me, and that's why I picked it. So I think I picked well, because I'm going to give this 4.25 stars. I really enjoyed this. I'd like to say it was a short read because it was only like 160 pages, but it actually ended up taking me a little longer than I expected it to, because it's the kind of book where you need to stop and think about what she's writing. There's some philosophical conversations in this. There is a look at passion. I mean, this book is called The Passion because you're looking at what passion is for different people. What happens when you live a life full of passion? What happens when your passion is... There's a little baby butt right back there. I just noticed. It's a doll. Mom had to use a doll during Gish, and I'm like, wait, there's a little baby butt. Yeah, sorry. Our house is... It's not our best at the moment. In this book, they're really talking about how passion shows who you are, without passion, you don't know who you are in a lot of ways. And then what happens when passion is either taken away from you or cannot be fulfilled for whatever reason. So I thought this was really well done. It was beautiful writing, very thoughtful, made me think quite a bit. It's about these two characters, and there's 4 sections of this book. The first one is about Henri, and he is a young French man who comes from a very small town, village really, and he joins Napoleon Bonaparte's army. His passion in the beginning is Napoleon. Meeting this boy who's gone to war because he has these high hopes for Napoleon, and what happens along the process, along the way. And then the second part of the story is about Villanelle. She is a young woman in Venice, and Venice is this dark and mysterious city that always changes, never is the same. You get lost there easily, which I've been to Venice, and I can say that the vibe that she used in this book about Venice, I felt was pretty accurate, at least from a visiting standpoint, because I've never lived there, so I don't know for sure. But when I went to Venice, I loved Venice. I loved the feel of the city, and I felt like this book captured that feeling quite well. So Villanelle, she's not necessarily a gambler herself, but she works for the casino. She does cards. She does play occasionally, but her passion in the beginning is other people's passion. She loves people who come to gamble. People are gambling not because they are looking forward to winning. They're gambling because they like taking the risk. And so she finds that invigorating. She just loves it. But then she actually finds her passion in a woman that she meets. So we follow this story about her and this woman that she falls in love with. And then the third section is about where Henri and Villanelle actually meet and their lives become intertwined. And so we kind of find out more about their situation as friends and what happens in their life after that. And then the last section is kind of the aftermath of the story. It's what's going on now that everything has happened. It says on here, it recalls Garcia Marquez, meaning Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who wrote 100 Years of Solitude, which I loved. I really enjoyed that book. And I would say that the writing style is not the same as Marquez's writing style. It's very different. Her writing style is very succinct, and she writes sections. You get your section, then the topic changes. It's all in the same story, but there's like individual sections, whereas Gabriel Garcia Marquez's writing is very circular and it's kind of continuous in a way. But what is similar about them is that they both write magical realism in a way that has the same feel. And it's these stories that are being elaborated on that feel like they could be real life stories, but then the elaborations that the storyteller is giving makes them seem very fantastical and ridiculous. Not ridiculous in a bad way, but ridiculous in a, this isn't real life, this is magical. And so I really did like the magical realism element to this book. I actually didn't realize it was going to have any magical realism. It was a bit subtle towards the beginning. It became a lot more pronounced at the end, and I really liked that. I would recommend this if you are looking for a work that has beautiful writing and has a lot of very thoughtful moments. Thoughtful moments, like I said, about love, about passion, and I don't necessarily just mean passion in the sex sense. I mean it more in the passion about life and the different things that are happening in your life and how that reflects who you are as a person. If you like classics, if you like more literary fiction, I would recommend this book because I really did enjoy it. So it is the 1st of September, and I technically finished Cinder by Marissa Meyer at 3 a.m. this morning. So I stayed up finishing this book. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I will be doing a live discussion about this with Danielle from Bookara. I will put a link up here to it because it will have happened, well, actually this past Friday, because this will be coming out on Sunday. So this is a YA sci-fi about a young woman named Cinder, and she's actually a cyborg. She's about 60% cyborg. She's a stepmother, but at the same time, it's more like Cinder's her servant in a lot of ways. And I guess that's true for Cinderella in the original story. And she has two sisters, one named Pearl and one named Peony, and the Peony is the younger sister who she actually is close to. And then there is also a droid that is the servant of the family that is very close to Cinder's. This story surrounds a pandemic called letumosis. The Earth is dealing with this pandemic, and the emperor is actually ill, really ill with this pandemic that nobody has been able to survive from it. Everybody dies basically who gets the illness. That's a problem because then you've got Prince Kai, his son, who will become the emperor after the current reigning emperor dies. And he's also dealing with the Lunars. They were a colony of people who were originally from Earth, but then they have changed or evolved in the meantime, and it's quite different. And the Queen Lavanna from Lunar, expects to marry Prince Kai because she is willing to have a truce between the Lunar and Earth if Prince Kai will marry her. But of course, she runs her planet completely different. They have magical abilities that humans on Earth are very uncomfortable with. So Lunars are not well loved on the planet. There's a lot going on in this, and Cinder ends up meeting Prince Kai when he brings his own droid to be repaired by her because she is a mechanic. And the story goes on from there. When you pick this up, you're in it. You're just going. And it's really all about the action and what's happening with all these characters within the story. Not so much about the setting, not so much about character development. And you do get development of these characters as the story goes on, but she doesn't spend a lot of time with it, especially in the beginning. So in the beginning, it felt a little young, it is YA, and it felt a little young YA to me. And so I was kind of like, am I liking this? I'm not sure. I wasn't hating it, but I wasn't feeling super motivated and excited to pick it up. So there is a point in this when it really gets exciting, and then it really gets exciting. I do like the characters. I think Cinder is a great character, but a very sympathetic character. It's tough. Like, some of the things she goes through, I don't like Queen Lavanna, but man, I really don't like that stepmother either. She's awful. Audrey's a stepmother. She's just, ugh. I mean, she's supposed to be that way, right? And there's some really cringy moments in this book, which those are hard moments for me. Those moments where everything, you're just like, oh no, I can't stand it. The embarrassment factor, that's so painful to me. I hate embarrassing. Like, it's so funny because I've always thought, like, the things that I hate more than anything are embarrassing moments. Which is sad because you should hate scary moments, right? Or you should hate other kinds, shameful moments. But for me, embarrassing moments are the worst. And there's a couple of those in here where I'm just like, I can't read this. It's too painful. There has been a lot of conversation around this book because of the representation or lack thereof, because this book is set in New Beijing. And there are people who have said that the representation for Chinese culture in this was not well done because there is a mixture of other cultures in here. The main character, Lin, is spelled in the Vietnamese way. The fact that there is an empire, that there is an emperor, is more Japanese, not Chinese. And I do have to say, based off reading all the way through this, I think that was Meyer's intention, actually, because this is a commonwealth of 13 provinces, Asian provinces, not just China. I know that it's the name of the place that they are is New Beijing, and maybe that was a mistake in using that particular name for the city, because then you have the assumption that it's going to be Chinese focused culture. And I think that her intention, because after World War IV, which this book falls after World War IV, all these countries came together and formed one larger commonwealth. And so there is a lot of mixing of the cultures within this larger commonwealth, and I think that was Marissa Meyer's intention. I know that it did offend some people, and they did have problems with this, so be aware of that going into this. I'm coming from a perspective where I am a white person who does not have a lot of experience with Asian culture, so I have an opinion, but I don't know if it's a very valid opinion. And then I also can say, as far as the details go, because there also wasn't enough talking about Asian culture within this book, but I found that Marissa Meyer's writing is not very descriptive. So giving a lot of detailed information about a culture, she didn't give a lot of detailed information about a lot. Like, there wasn't much description in this book, in my opinion. I felt like it was really based off the conversations, the dialogue, what was going on in the moment, and there wasn't much that was expanded outside of that. So That is my opinion, but I also have looked at some of the opinions of people who were upset about this book, and I think they're very valid. Everybody's feelings are valid. So just something to think about, something interesting to think about when you go into this series. Ultimately, I'm really excited to go on into Scarlet. The ending of this is not satisfying at all. There was no point in the ending where you're like, okay, I could at least wait a while for the next book. No, you can't, because there's no... she just doesn't give you much. That was a bit frustrating, and I'm glad that I don't have to wait very long to read the second book. So 4.25 stars though. This is very exciting. If you're looking for an exciting book to get into, which has some really interesting ideas, I recommend this series. I think I'm going to enjoy it a lot. Alright, so basically that's what I read for the last 2 weeks. It is the 3rd today, and so I feel like I'm making a good start this month. Although I've been reading books that I was supposed to read for last month. Actually, I'm trying to finish Outlander because that's due at the library yesterday. I'm on page 490, and there's 640 pages, so I'm getting that one done as quickly as possible. And then I'm currently listening to The Lost City of Z. I'm well over 75% of the way done with that. I'm making progress on some of the books I'm reading, and I'm excited about September. So many good books I have to read. So click the like button if you like this video, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my sum-ups, what I've been reading, and let me know in the comment section down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. Thank you so much for watching.